Hi, Shelley. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. Um, you have a couple hospice experiences that are sort of vastly different. Do you want to
Yes,
go
sir.
into one?
Yeah, actually, we've been through three of them, but the first one, I was not a caregiver. It was my mother-in-law. My father-in-law took care of her. And that's when we learned that hospice is not there 24/7 in the state of South Carolina, where we're from. I don't know about other states, but we had heard through the grapevine that hospice could come in and stay with your loved ones for hours at a time, but that's not how it works. They are a great tool. They come in and help with, teaching you how to change diapers and how to, you know, administer meds when they get to the point where they need medication. And so my father-in-law was there for my mother-in-law, and our family was able to be there when she died, and we were around her bed and sang hymns and were able to watch her go out into eternity. But that's about the most that we were involved with her. But my first real involvement was with my mother, and I'll share this. There's hospice and there's home health, and we learned a lot. So my mom died in February of 18, and so back in the fall of 17, she was really struggling. She had lung cancer and COPD and just had a hard time breathing. And so they came out in, I think, October and talked about, maybe in September, talked about her going on hospice. And they said, you don't have to, doesn't mean you're getting ready to die right away. Hospice can come in and be a support for your family. And so we learned that we had a program here. One of the hospice agencies was a hospice and a home health agency. So she chose to go on home health, and they were an agency that transitioned from home health to hospice at the needed moment.
Sure.
So instead of getting on a home health agency and then later transferring to another agency through hospice, where you have to go through interviews and everything all over again, we got on that. So I would always suggest, if someone's not ready for hospice, to find an agency that does home health that will automatically transition to
And a little
hospice.
more
I don't know.
continuity.
Right. I don't know how your agency works, but that's how this one that we did, and we loved it. We had, I can't remember specifically if there was someone from, there was someone from home health that would come out and bathe my mom.
Mm-hmm.
It got hard to bathe her, and so they'd come out and help bathe. And the home health agency, she didn't really care for the bathers, but we got, the nurse was great, the physical therapy was great. They come out and help her walk and help her breathe, and
That was with
just different
Homecare,
things.
the therapy.
That was the home health care. And what happened was, she was on that for, well, from like October till February, I think.
Okay.
So I had given her last shower the Saturday before she died, and I realized this is not getting easier. I was helping her, and she was struggling to get up and go to the bathroom. So on Monday morning, or maybe Tuesday morning, we called hospice in, and they talked to her, or I guess the home health talked to her that weekend, and they said, we think you're ready for hospice, and she agreed. Right. Hospice came in, and unfortunately, we were only with them for 4 days, 3 days, something like that. They had the most wonderful caregivers. The bather would come in, CNA would come in and give her bed bath because she couldn't get up anymore. And she just was so good with her. We had the hospice nurse came out 2 or 3 times that first week, that only week that she was on hospice. They didn't think that she would die so quickly. They thought she'd be around for a while. So we thought we were going to be on hospice for a few months.
Mm-hmm. Was there any big differences that you noticed between home care nurses and home care aides versus hospice aides and hospice nurses?
Yes, the hospice aides we loved. The hospice nurses and the home health nurses were both very comparable. They were all awesome. Yeah. The aide that came out to bathe her through home health, she didn't care for. We had to change aides, but by the time we went to change aides, she had already switched into hospice.
Right.
And she wasn't using an aide for the first couple months. She just had the nurse would come out twice a week. She had a physical therapist come out. All that is only on home health. That's not on hospice. But the hospice nurse came out 2 or 3 times that week. The aide came out at least 2 or 3 times. And she taught us how to move her in the bed. Because one of the things you have to know is when your loved one goes on hospice, my mom wasn't ready to go on the hospital bed at first, but then we realized she needed to because we needed her to in order to move her in bed.
Right.
So one thing that I would encourage people is don't be afraid to get a hospital bed in your living room because that's where we put it.
Made life easier for you and for her?
It made life easier to take care of her, to move her up and down in the bed. I also ordered off of line. This was like the best thing, and I tell everybody, there's a hospital grade pad, and it has 4 handles, 2 on each side, and it's long. It's longer than the torso of the person.
Yeah.
And you put it under them, and you change sheets so much less. You have much less mess.
Right. Help roll her a little bit, right? Is
yeah,
it
it helps to one person takes either side and you pull them up in the hospital bed so they don't scrunch way down because they tend to scrunch way down when you move the back up.
Yep.
So that was one of the things I learned from the hospice nurses and CNAs. And I on my own found that, and I've encouraged others because they just bring the throwaway pee pads, the, I don't know what they call them.
Chucks.
Anyway, chucks, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And the chucks are okay, and we use them on top of the handheld one. But like I said, Mom was only on hospice for a few days. She was only in the hospital bed for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. She died Saturday morning, so she was in the hospital bed 2 or 3 nights.
Yeah, and Shelley, all the equipment and everything was all supplied by hospice, correct?
Yep, they bring a wheelchair or a walker or both. In my father-in-law's case, they brought us potty chairs, so we have a commode next to the bed. My mom had all the oxygen she needed. One of the things that is really important is the medication. And they bring you your morphine and you put it up. I think you don't keep that in the fridge. I think you keep it in a hidden place until you need it, and you just have it ready. And I'm so glad that both times that my mom and my father-in-law were on hospice, and my mother-in-law, I heard that she also had morphine ready to go, because they're going to suddenly just need it. 1 minute they're fine, and then all of a sudden they need the morphine, and the morphine keeps them comfortable. Mm-hmm. I don't think, I was reading, I think on our page, the hospice page, a lot of people think morphine is like euthanasia. I don't think so. I think it's just to help them not, like my mom, she had what's it called, when air hunger, air starvation?
I've heard air starvation.
Yeah, and so the morphine helped her be able to breathe. And it was interesting to watch her breathe more easily when she had morphine in her system.
Yeah.
And of course, it keeps you out. So, the morphine we only used the last 24 hours of both my mom and my father-in-law.
And you felt comfortable having the guidance from the nurses to?
Absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm. With my mom, there were several of us there when she died. With my father-in-law, it was just my husband and me. The morphine was brought in the beginning, and they I'll go ahead and fast forward from my mom to my father-in-law. He was diagnosed on Christmas with terminal cancer, and he came home to my mom's house. I kept him there, and we put the hospital bed in and had him in the hospital bed. He came home on hospice. The doctor had told me she thought he wouldn't live a month, and ironically, both my mom and father-in-law had the same oncologist, so that was kind of emotional for me. But we brought him home, and he got better. All of a sudden, because he could barely walk, because he'd been in the hospital for a kidney stone over the Christmas holidays, and they ended up finding out he had stomach cancer. Brought him home, and about a week in, he was up and walking. He was using his walker, but he was walking to the bathroom without any issues and doing real good. He wasn't using the bedpan. And then he kept saying he wanted to go home to his house because he had a farm. And we're like, you got to get stronger, Granddad, before you can go home. And hospice would come in twice. I think she came in twice a week and then once a week, and then was going to go every other week, but he ended up dying at the end of January. So he lived exactly a month. But they gave us the morphine in the beginning. They gave us some other medication that I think it was also a pain med. And we had that in the back, hidden up in the back. One was in the back of the fridge. The other was above the fridge, out of the way. They always tell you to put them where that nobody else can get to them so that just the caregiver knows where to get them. Sure. And so hospice, they sent out, we had a chaplain come out, happened to be a lady chaplain, and she sang and I sang. So we brought out the hymn books and sang some hymns around my father-in-law's bed. We had family members come and sing as well, my daughter and my kids, and my father-in-law loved it. He had some really good times during that 4-week period in the home. And he kept thinking he was getting better. He wasn't having any pain, and he stopped taking all his meds because he didn't think he needed them. So, the hospice nurse, she says, you just go with what they want, and it's all about keeping them comfortable because they're going to die. And he may have lived more than a month, but the timing was just right at a month. And I'm trying to think of what else. He had a lady came in 2 times a week or 2 times a week and bathed him, and she was so good with him. Yeah. She'd walk in and he would just get bright-eyed.
I think the aides and stuff helping out is great because it gives the family a chance to be a family. You're not just the caregiver. You're letting someone else sort of take over that part.
Exactly. And during that time, we'd have a 45-minute break where, we could deal with other things, the kids or whatever. He also had a pastor. His pastor came to visit him probably 5 times in 4 weeks, maybe 6 times. And so we give him time alone with him. The nurse would spend time with him, and excuse me, every time she'd take his vitals, she would make him feel good because she told him his vitals were better than hers, and they were. He had really good vitals all the way to the very, very last night. But hospice was very, I think it's pertinent to have hospice involved. I think it's very important to have them because they are there to answer any question you have and to support you around the clock. Mm-hmm. So the night that he died, he had been on morphine starting that morning, and that night he woke up because he'd gone to sleep for like 12 or 13 hours, and he woke up and trying to figure out, are you in pain? Are you just waking up? Well, we eventually realized he was in pain. We called the hospice nurse. We talked to 2 different hospice nurses during the middle of the night, like 12:30, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they were very helpful. So, having the morphine on hand was a tremendous blessing because as soon as we got that in them, it took care of the pain, and you could see the relief that, you have when they're in pain, their face gets all, and so you could see the face just kind of calm down. And so we were able to be there for him and, realized that he was gone by 5:30 in the morning. He had kind of taken his own last breath. We didn't have, we did with my mom that, what is that called where it gurgles in the back of the throat?
Rattle.
The rattle. We didn't have the death rattle with him at all. His wife had it and my mom had it. Mm-hmm. But we did have, and that's what the medication in the fridge was. The nurse is like, keep this handy. This is for you. In case he gets the death rattle, it's to calm the family because it really upsets a lot of family members. So it's real important when you get on hospice, if you get a family member on hospice, to have that medicine and the morphine available so that it'll be comfortable for him and for the family members.
That's a great point you bring up because hospice, while it's primarily for the person who's sick, the terminal person, it's a support for the family, so
exactly.
They follow you for a year after the person passes away. So you should have support for a year after the person passes, emotional support.
I think we got cards in the mail, but I have not specifically had any follow-up. And I think a lot of that is because we have we're faith-based. Mm-hmm. So we have our church and our church family and they see that. And so I think they see the strength that we find and, we don't sorrow without hope. And so we were able to make it through that way. I think that's about it. I mean, I would encourage anybody, even if they're not right at death's door, to get on hospice because it's a good program to have for long-term. Right. I'm glad my mother-in-law was on it for a full month. Yep. And I wish Mama had been on it longer. I think it would have benefited her more.
Right. And that's actually what we hear a lot, people who wish they would have done it sooner, whether or not it's mm-hmm. just out of fear of not knowing what it is or, doctors being nervous about suggesting it because they don't want to upset anyone. I
think it's a stigma that hospice has that you're going to die inevitably. You're going to die soon. And I've had the hospice nurse that used to come out to our house. she would say she had old people. She had like 100-year-old person that was dying on hospice and it went off hospice because they got better.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Yeah. And those nurses, it takes a special nurse for sure, you know, to do hospice, special nurses aides as well. So yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Shelley, for sharing your experience. And, you know, I'm glad that your family was able to get the support that they needed.
Amen. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much, Shelley. We're back real quick. Actually, Shelley and I were having a conversation after the end of the interview, and she had an afterthought, something that she wanted to add. So, Shelley, go ahead.
Yeah, when I mentioned having the hospital bed in your living room, one of the most important things and one of the things I'm most grateful for is the fact that we had hospice in the home rather than our loved one having to go to a facility, because that way you're in a comfortable environment with the living room furniture where people can sit down and relax, and you're not in a hospital room where there's no chairs. You've got beds. The night my mom died, we were all laying in different beds around the house trying to rest in between checking on her. And it's just a very comfortable situation. And I would encourage anybody that can make it to the end with hospice in the home to do that for your loved one. I think that's the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Help me
Personal.
out.
It's a lot more personal than being in the hospital, and it's got to be more
Dignity.
much more
The
dignity.
most dignified way to go out, I think, is having your loved ones around in the home. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I'm sure your mom probably enjoyed having the family around too.
Oh, yes. And one thing with hospice, we were talking afterwards, they help to navigate and let you know, help people to say goodbye. We were able to do that with my mom. Hospice is like, oh, yeah, she's not going to make it through the weekend. So we knew that at that point, and we had everybody that we could think of on the phone. And now that we have FaceTime, we were having FaceTime her and say their goodbyes over the phone because they were from other states around the country. So that was another good thing that we were able to do. A lot of times in the hospital, you can't even get a signal on your phone. So in the home, you've got that as well.
Yeah.
And we had a house full of people there, and you wouldn't have had that in a hospital room in most cases.
Right. No, you're absolutely right.
I'm thankful for.
Yeah. Thank you for adding
Thank you
that.
again.
Yeah. Thank you, Shelley. I really appreciate
very
you sharing your
welcome.
story. And it takes a lot of courage to be able to share everything so personal. So thank you.
Thank you. It was my honor to be their caregiver too. Very much so.